They thought he was just another scholarship kid, someone to mock for sport, but when they shoved him in front of the class and laughed, they didn't know they just handed the chalk to a genius. What happened next turned a racist joke into a moment they'd never forget. Jamal Brooks was the kind of kid most people overlooked. 11 years old, thin as a rail, and quiet to the point of invisibility, he moved through the halls of Northcrest Academy like a shadow, always present, rarely seen. His uniform never quite fit right, his backpack had a broken strap, and he always sat in the back of the room, scribbling equations in a beat-up spiral notebook that had more math than margins. What no one saw was that Jamal didn't need the front row to shine. His mind was the front row. Jamal lived with his mom, Denise Brooks, in a modest apartment just off a noisy freeway in East Atlanta. 2 rooms, 1 bath, and a kitchen that smelled like love and lemon cleaner. Denise worked full-time as a cashier at a local grocery store, then cleaned offices at night to make ends meet. They didn't have much, but she made sure Jamal had everything that counted: books, encouragement, and a belief that his mind was something special. And she was right. By the time Jamal was 9, he was solving high school-level math problems for fun. By 10, he was sneaking into online college lectures, absorbing everything from calculus to number theory like a sponge. Math wasn't just something he was good at. It was the way he understood the world. While other kids played video games, Jamal played with equations. He saw patterns in shadows, symmetry in cracked sidewalks, Fibonacci sequences in sunflower heads. The world wasn't random to Jamal. It was beautifully structured, like a song written in numbers. But Northcrest Academy wasn't built for kids like Jamal. It was a prestigious private school filled with the sons and daughters of doctors, CEOs, and country club regulars. Jamal had only gotten in thanks to a merit-based scholarship program aimed at increasing diversity, a program the school liked to promote in its brochures, even as it quietly treated kids like Jamal as second tier. He was one of only 5 black students in the entire 6th grade, and the only one in the advanced math track. While his white classmates rode to school in luxury SUVs, Jamal took the city bus, transferring twice and waking up before dawn just to make it on time. He never complained. He just listened, learned, and quietly aced every test they put in front of him. Still, the whispers were always there. He only got in because of the scholarship. Probably just memorizes stuff. Bet he can't even explain what he's doing. The worst came from Tyler Grayson. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and born into privilege, Tyler was the kind of boy who never questioned whether he belonged, because the world had already decided he did. His father was a board member at Northcrest. His name was engraved on a donor plaque in the science wing, and his confidence dripped with entitlement. Tyler was used to being the smartest kid in the room until Jamal arrived. At first it was subtle, snide comments, exaggerated eye rolls, little digs during group projects. But as Jamal continued to outperform him on every quiz, the quiet resentment began to curdle into something meaner, something uglier. Tyler didn't just dislike Jamal. He needed to prove Jamal didn't belong. And so he waited. Waited for the perfect moment to humiliate him. The stage was already set, a school-wide event called Math Challenge Day, where students were encouraged to come up front, solve problems, and win prizes for their house teams. Most of the students treated it like a game, but Tyler had something else in mind, something that would turn the spotlight into a weapon. And Jamal, he had no idea what was coming. Math Challenge Day at Northcrest Academy was treated like a holiday. The gym was decked out with banners, balloons, and fold-out tables covered in snacks and juice boxes that cost more than Jamal's entire lunch budget for the week. Students wore their house colors with pride, and the faculty tried to liven things up with cheesy math puns and matching t-shirts that read, "We make problems disappear." It was the kind of event that looked good in newsletters and photo ops. But for kids like Jamal, it always felt like a trap dressed as a celebration. Each grade had its own segment. Teachers would project a series of increasingly difficult math problems onto a large screen. Students could volunteer or be chosen to come up front, solve the problem on the whiteboard, and win points for their house. The energy was lighthearted, playful even. For most of the students, it was a chance to show off a little, win some bragging rights, maybe grab an extra snack. But Jamal never raised his hand. Not because he wasn't capable, but because he knew the rules were different for him. If he got it right, it was a fluke. If he got it wrong, it was proof he didn't belong. The margin for error didn't exist. Not for the scholarship kid, not for the quiet black boy sitting alone in the corner. He had spent most of the morning focused on staying invisible, doing mental math in the back of his notebook just to pass the time. He'd already solved half the problems being thrown at the sixth graders before they even finished reading them aloud. But then Tyler raised his hand. "Mr. Green," Tyler called out, standing up with his usual swagger. "I've got a challenge." The room perked up. Tyler was popular, loud, and always had something flashy planned. Mr. Green smiled. "Go for it, Tyler. Who are you challenging?" Tyler didn't hesitate. He turned, eyes scanning the room, until they landed on Jamal. "I picked Jamal." A low ripple passed through the gym. Some students chuckled, others looked surprised. Jamal looked up startled. He hadn't spoken all day. Mr. Green blinked. "Are you sure? Jamal hasn't volunteered." Tyler's voice cut in, syrupy and sharp. "Come on, he's the genius, right? Let's see what he's really got." Then under his breath, but just loud enough for nearby students to hear, Tyler added, "Unless you think he's only good at counting change." A few students laughed nervously. Others turned away uncomfortable. But the damage was done. Jamal felt every eye in the gym turn toward him. His heart pounded, heat rising in his cheeks. He looked toward the back of the room where Ms. Washington, the only black teacher at the school, watched him with tight lips and narrowed eyes. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her expression said it all. You don't owe them anything. But if you go with your head high. Jamal slowly stood up. The gym fell quiet. He walked toward the board with measured steps, notebook still in his hand, gripping it like a shield. As he passed Tyler, the boy leaned in and whispered, "Better not choke, math boy." Jamal didn't respond. He faced the screen as Mr. Green projected the next level problem. A multivariable equation with fractions, exponents, and a time constraint of 90 seconds. It wasn't impossible, but it was designed to shake confidence, designed to expose weakness. Tyler sat down with a grin, arms crossed, already preparing for the laugh. Jamal stared at the problem. The numbers rearranged themselves in his head like a puzzle snapping into place. He picked up the marker, and without a word, he began to write. The marker felt foreign in Jamal's hand, slightly too smooth, too cold, but his grip was steady. The equation loomed large on the projector, a multi-step, multivariable expression with embedded fractions and exponential values, the kind of problem designed to trip up even the best students. But for Jamal, it was less a challenge, more like a rhythm, something his mind naturally danced with. He started slow, deliberately, writing each step with calm precision. First, he simplified the inner parentheses. Then came the exponent reduction. He carried the negative signs, balanced both sides of the equation, and moved through each transformation like he was following sheet music. No wasted motion, no second guessing. At first, the room stayed quiet out of expectation, waiting for him to stumble, to hesitate, to prove that Tyler was right. But as Jamal kept writing, the mood started to shift. His posture wasn't that of someone guessing. It was focused, composed, like someone working in a language no one else fully understood. The longer he stood there, the quieter the gym became. The whispers faded. Even the teacher, Mr. Green, leaned in slightly, tracking Jamal's logic line by line. Tyler, still seated in the front row, began tapping his foot. He forced a smirk, but it looked more like a grimace now. He hadn't expected Jamal to actually hold his own, let alone look confident. Jamal reached the final step of the equation and paused. Not because he was unsure, but because for a moment he realized every eye in the room was on him. Not mocking, not doubting, watching. He wrote down the final answer. Then he turned around. A few seconds of silence followed. Then Mr. Green walked toward the board, reviewing Jamal's work with a red pen in hand, his standard routine. He started at the top, nodding slowly, then moved to the middle, still nodding. By the time he reached the last line, his expression had shifted. He capped the pen and looked at the room. "Correct," he said clearly, firmly. A quiet murmur rippled across the gym, equal parts surprise and disbelief. But Mr. Green wasn't finished. "In fact," he continued, turning to Jamal, "that was one of the cleanest, most logical solutions I've seen all day." That should have been the end of it. But Tyler couldn't let it go. He shot up from his seat and raised his voice. "He must have seen the answer before. That problem was on the practice sheet last month. He probably memorized it." It was a lie. The equation wasn't on any sheet Jamal had seen, and even if it had been, solving it with that level of clarity couldn't be faked. But Tyler's accusation wasn't about truth. It was about control. It was about reasserting his place at the top. A few students looked around, unsure. A couple of them nodded, not out of belief, but out of habit. The kind of nod people give when someone powerful speaks, even if they're wrong. Jamal felt it, the weight of their eyes shifting again, from awe to doubt. Ms. Washington stepped forward. "That equation was written by me," she said, "this morning. Jamal didn't see it. None of the students did. And frankly, Tyler, if you could solve it as cleanly as he just did, we'd all be applauding you instead." The room froze. Tyler's face flushed red. He tried to respond, but no words came out. Jamal stood still. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just stood there, steady, calm, dignified in a way that didn't need defending. Because even as the air still hummed with tension, one thing had become crystal clear. Jamal didn't just solve a problem on the board. He just exposed a much bigger one sitting in the front row. The gym was silent, so silent you could hear the hum of the projector and the distant click of a vending machine down the hall. Jamal still stood near the whiteboard, marker in hand, shoulders square, eyes steady. Tyler's accusation hung in the air like a thick fog, one that refused to clear even after Ms. Washington's calm, pointed rebuttal. But Jamal wasn't finished. He turned back to the board, erased the problem he had just solved with a few swift strokes, and said quietly, but clearly enough for the entire room to hear, "Can I show another way to solve it?" Mr. Green blinked in surprise. Yes, of course." Jamal didn't wait. He rewrote the original equation, this time approaching it from a completely different angle, substituting values, reordering steps, applying an advanced technique called matrix reduction, something far beyond the sixth-grade curriculum. The room watched in stunned silence as he worked, not just solving the problem again, but explaining each step out loud with a clarity that sounded more like a seasoned tutor than a middle schooler. "You can also break this down into a system of equations," Jamal said as he sketched another set of variables underneath. "And if you isolate the constants first, the relationships between the terms become easier to see." He stepped back, hands chalk dusted, and let the board speak for itself. Even the teachers didn't move. Mr. Green's mouth opened slightly as he stared at the solution. He wasn't just impressed. He was stunned. He turned toward Jamal, blinking like he'd just realized he'd been teaching someone who knew more than half the faculty. And then quietly at first, someone began to clap. It was Ms. Washington, slow, deliberate, unwavering. Then another student joined in, then another. And suddenly the gym filled with the sound of applause. Not forced, not polite, but thunderous, real, uncontainable. Jamal didn't smile. He didn't bow. He simply stood there, letting the moment wash over him, not as validation, but as clarity. Because in that moment, something shifted. The applause wasn't just for a correct answer. It was for the breaking of a mold, the shattering of a stereotype, the undeniable brilliance of a boy who had spent his life being told to stay quiet, stay humble, stay in his place. And Tyler, still frozen in his seat, had nothing left to say. His usual smirk was gone, replaced with something raw and uncomfortable. He wasn't just embarrassed, he was exposed. Everything he'd believed about his own superiority, about Jamal's supposed inferiority, had just crumbled in front of the entire school. Mr. Green, still shaking his head in disbelief, finally spoke. "Jamal," he said, "where did you learn that method?" "At home," Jamal replied simply. "On YouTube, and some books from the public library." The room went quiet again, this time not with awkwardness, but with awe. No tutors, no prep school, no paid programs, just raw brilliance, discipline, and the kind of hunger no amount of privilege could manufacture. A few rows back, one of the assistant principals whispered something to the academic dean. The words "gifted program" and "university outreach" floated through the air. Jamal didn't notice. He was too busy watching Ms. Washington, who gave him a slow, proud nod, the kind of gesture that said, "You did more than prove a point today. You rewrote the narrative," and the truth was, he had. Jamal hadn't just solved a math problem. He had dismantled an entire assumption. Live, on stage, in front of his peers and his doubters. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He let the math speak, and it spoke louder than any insult ever could. After the applause faded, the room didn't return to normal. It couldn't. Something unspoken had shifted, a crack in the surface that no one could ignore anymore. Jamal didn't say much after the presentation. He simply handed the marker back to Mr. Green, nodded once, and walked back to his seat. But his walk wasn't the same. It wasn't the walk of a boy trying to stay invisible anymore. It was the quiet, grounded stride of someone who had just reclaimed his space. Tyler didn't meet his eyes as he passed. The smugness that once oozed from him had vanished. He sat stiff in his seat, chewing the inside of his cheek, staring at the gym floor like it held the answers he'd never find. The rest of the day moved on, technically, but the atmosphere was different. In the cafeteria, students who had never spoken to Jamal before were now coming up to him. Some just said, "Good job." Others asked questions about the problem he solved, and a few simply stared at him like he'd become something mythical overnight. But Jamal wasn't interested in the sudden attention. He gave polite nods, soft smiles, but stayed focused, calm. Later that week, everything escalated faster than anyone expected. Dr. Armitage, the head of school, requested a meeting with Jamal and his mother. Denise Brooks arrived after her shift at the grocery store, still in her work uniform, nervous but composed. She wasn't used to being called into the main office unless something was wrong, but this time it wasn't bad news. It was opportunity. Sitting across the polished oak desk, Dr. Armitage spoke slowly, with the kind of language reserved for donors and dignitaries. He mentioned a partnership Northcrest had with a local university, an early placement program for exceptional students. He talked about mentorships, scholarships, travel opportunities. Then he said Jamal's name would be the first submitted for the upcoming program. Denise didn't say much. She just looked at her son, eyes glassy but proud. And Jamal, ever calm, just nodded once. But inside, he was on fire. For the first time, the door wasn't just cracked open, it was wide, and the people on the other side had no choice but to step back and let him walk through. What no one knew, what Jamal hadn't told anyone except his mom, was that he had already been dreaming bigger than North Crest. He had a notebook at home filled with handwritten college applications. Not filled out yet, just prepared, ready. He'd bookmarked summer STEM camps, recorded lectures from MIT, and even drafted an email to a math professor he admired, asking for advice. Now that future wasn't just possible, it was calling. Tyler never apologized, not with words. But his silence in the weeks that followed said more than any forced apology ever could. He no longer challenged Jamal in class, no more muttered insults, no more side eyes. Just quiet, respectful distance. Jamal didn't need an apology. He didn't carry anger. He carried focus. And in that focus, he found something bigger than victory. He found clarity. By the end of the semester, Jamal was tutoring other students in math, some of the same ones who had laughed during Math Challenge Day. And he helped them without condescension, without bitterness, because Jamal knew something they were still learning. You don't need to crush someone to rise. You just need to stand. And sometimes, standing with truth is the loudest answer of all. Some stories don't need a plot twist. They just need to be told. Jamal Brooks didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue, didn't complain, didn't ask for fairness. He walked into a room stacked against him and let his mind do what it was born to do, illuminate. And in doing so, he reminded us all of something too often forgotten. Brilliance has no zip code. It doesn't come with a trust fund. It doesn't wear a specific skin color. In a world that too often measures worth by pedigree, appearance, or privilege, Jamal's story flips the script. He didn't just solve a math problem. He solved something deeper, the problem of perception. The assumption that genius only looks a certain way, comes from certain neighborhoods, speaks with a certain tone. He shattered that myth with every number he wrote on that board. And perhaps the most powerful part? He never had to humiliate anyone to do it. He didn't retaliate. He didn't rub his success in Tyler's face. He just stood in his truth. Quiet, firm, undeniable. That's real power. Because sometimes the strongest statement isn't what you say, it's what you prove. Jamal's story is not just about a boy and a chalkboard. It's about every kid who's been underestimated. Every student who's been overlooked, doubted, or dismissed because of where they come from or what they look like. It's about every young mind waiting for someone, anyone, to believe in their potential. And if we're paying attention, it's a challenge to all of us. Look again. Look past the stereotypes, past the uniforms, the zip codes, the silence, because behind those quiet eyes might live the next great mind, just waiting for one open door, one fair chance, one moment to be seen. And when that moment comes, like Jamal, they won't ask for applause. They'll just solve the problem and let the answer speak for itself.